When I first saw a fire hose and thought, wow, what a beautiful piece of lovely wonderfulness this is, I knew it would be my job to make sure it had a second life.
So these trousers, these yoga pants, it could stand up by itself. It was like having sandpaper against the skin.
We need people to get as excited about recycling as they do about, I don't know, the next series of Line of Duty, right?
Hi, and welcome to Emissions Impossible. I'm Kim McAllister.
And my name's Dr. Mark Sumner.
Everybody get up.
Now, I am a broadcast journalist, but Mark, you're a fashion expert.
Well, I'm glad this is an audio recording because I'm not an expert on fashion per se. But what I am really interested in and what I've been looking at for I guess the past 20 years now is understanding how we get fashion from the cotton fields of Pakistan or from the oil refineries around the world and turn that into garments that we all want to buy or want to purchase, all those garments that, we fall in love with, or those garments that we wear once and throw away.
So you're not going to style me?
I could, but I don't think you would want me to do that.
But you are going to give me choices about how to make better, more ethical fashion decisions, right?
Absolutely. So, we'll definitely be talking about, how to be more ethical or potentially how to be more sustainable. That might be the better term for us to use. Mm-hmm. But of course, it will depend, Kim, on what you mean by sustainable and ethical.
Well, this is where I hoped we could start by clarifying a few things. So let me hit you with some questions. Fast fashion, is it bad?
It depends what you mean by bad. It also depends on where that fast fashion has come from. Yes, there are some examples of where we can say that fast fashion has had some really negative impacts. Things like overconsumption, things like poor standards within factories in terms of social standards for workers, for example. But actually some of the research that we've done looking at fast fashion has shown that fast fashion garments are of a higher quality and last far longer than some of the designer labels. Wow. So what we have to be careful with when we talk about these very generalized terms is the fact that they are very generalized. Some of the fast fashion brands that we tend to label as being unsustainable are actually leading the way in things like social compliance within factories, things like using sustainable raw materials and processes in that supply chain, and also working with their customers to take those garments back to avoid them going into landfill.
Okay, here's another one. If I buy something with the label made in the UK, can I be assured that the supply chain is minimal?
Well, that label, made in the UK, will tell us where the last major operation in the production of that garment occurred. And that could be as simple, for example, with a T-shirt. A T-shirt has been made in some other part of the rest of the world. It's been brought to the UK and it's been printed. And therefore, we can say that that garment is made in the UK. So that's one of the issues with the labelling. When we look at the science behind the social and environmental impacts associated with garments, it is related to that supply chain and where the raw material came from. Where was the cotton grown? How was the cotton grown? It's also related to how that cotton was spun into a yarn. Very much related to the process of adding colour, this dyeing process. And the water consumption and chemical use. So these are all really important aspects of that supply chain that really define the impacts of that garment. Where the garment was actually made could only be about 4% of the carbon footprint. So really, at the end of the day, that's not that important.
Okay, I'm glad I asked. Okay, third and final question. We love to think that things that we buy are all natural. If the dye is all natural, is that a good thing?
Well, if we go back to William Morris, and I say that now because I am looking at a William Morris design in my curtains at the moment, we were using natural dyes. The chemical or the material that William Morris would have used for green would have been arsenic.
Arsenic? Oh my goodness, that is not good.
Now, we obviously know that arsenic is not particularly good for humans. Arsenic isn't the only natural colourant that has been used by humans. So when we say natural, we have to be very, very careful about what we mean by natural. Cotton is a natural fibre. It's a plant. It's a shrub. And we would all assume that that shrub is part of nature, therefore it's good for the planet. And it is. But the problem we have with cotton is the way that we grow cotton. This very intensive agricultural system that is all about trying to maximize the yield that we get from the cotton farm to make sure that we can produce the cotton at the lowest value possible to allow us to have t-shirts that are £2 or £3 each. And it's that agricultural process that we see for cotton, but other natural products that actually starts to really raise questions about the sustainability of these fibres. And evidence, scientific investigations into cotton has shown time and time again that cotton, in the way that it's grown in the conventional market, is probably one of the most harmful fibres that we use in the textile industry.
Oh no, because everyone loves cotton. It's such a lovely material to wear and it's great for people with eczema or other skin conditions. But, this is why we're making this podcast, because there's rarely a straightforward or simple solution, right? We need to unpick it a little.
Absolutely, and I like the unpick there. I think you've got your first textile pun into the conversation. It's going to go downhill from now on. But that's the really important thing to bear in mind when we're talking about sustainability. And this is one of the things that we focus on, this idea of understanding consumer behaviour. And the fact that cotton is so suited to the human body, it's soft, it's breathable, it takes colour well, it's good value, and it's washable as well. That makes it really suitable for humans. So what we're talking about in terms of the sustainability movement within textiles is, yes, we're going to look at other new fibres to see whether there's new ways of doing things that have a lower impact. But it's also recognising the fact that consumers really like cotton. And what we should be thinking about here is also working out how we can grow cotton in a much better way. And there's been lots and lots of fantastic development in these areas. Things like Better Cotton Initiative, things like the organic movement have shown that we can grow cotton in a way that minimises some of those impacts, not just for the environment, but also for the welfare of farmers who are reliant on the production of cotton to provide them with an income.
Yeah, all really good points. There's been so much change in the fashion industry recently, hasn't there?
Absolutely. In the past 20 years that I've been working in the industry, what we've seen is a real shift in the way that brands and retailers interact with their consumers and understanding how valuable and important fashion is for individuals. It really is deeply ingrained into our subconscious, this idea of fashion and what it does for us. Sustainability is critical now. We are in crisis stages, and we know that the fashion industry is a huge industry. In fact, it's an industry of industries. We're talking about thousands and thousands of tons of textile waste. Every single person on the planet, virtually every single person on the planet, engages in fashion. This idea of I have to wear clothes.
Well, there's the few individuals who refuse, but yeah, they're not. They're the exception.
Yeah, they are, absolutely. And luckily, I don't get any of those in my lecture, because that would make it really quite difficult. It's not surprising that the fashion industry has such a big impact, because everyone engages in it.
Well, you've led me seamlessly to our first guest. Thank you, Mark. Nikki Matthews works for the University of Arts London, and she works with industry to help them implement changes to their business structures. And so the first thing I had to ask her was, how are these attitudes to industry changing?
We produced a survey of over 2,400 SMEs across the whole of the UK. Some of the real opportunities that they've identified for change are particularly around increasing sustainability-led activities, which is absolutely fantastic. And when you think that almost 82% of the companies in the UK are small businesses, and how much change that actually means on the ground for people, I think that's an incredible whetting of the appetite, really.
Absolutely. That's wonderful to hear, because you do wonder sometimes how much companies are paying lip service or trying to do something that's seen to be good for the environment.
It makes a lot of business sense, both in terms of your marketing and of your story, but also on the bottom line, a lot of activities that are kind of inverted commas sustainable are also quality. So it's about the whole of the circularity of a product. But also thinking about the supply chains, from both a global perspective and also a local perspective. A lot of businesses in the UK in particular now are looking at what's on the doorstep. I mean, obviously we don't grow cotton in the UK, but we do have a fantastic wool industry. There are initiatives that are growing flax again in the UK, the linen industry, for example. So there's a lot of activity that can be fairly localised. and also the recycling element. If you have a t-shirt that's, say, made of a poly cotton, so it's part polyester and part cotton, then there are initiatives and there are activities that you can do to separate those and take them into new recycling processes. And a lot of those are starting to be seen again in the UK, and some of the work we're doing with companies enables that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be hard pushed to find someone who doesn't want to do the right thing, but it can be quite daunting to change a whole system, a whole business model. So where do you begin when you're working with these companies who want to make these changes?
Well, absolutely. And it could be, I've talked about circularity. You can almost jump in at any point. So you could, look at the end customer, the consumer. You could look at the raw materials. For a company to be really, truly sustainable, then all points of that need to be kind of hit. And I think one of the things that we're seeing a lot of now is around business models. And I think one of the things that is changing, both from businesses and from a consumer point of view, is how that relationship actually works. Whether we buy something, whether we rent something. Some companies are looking at almost having like a hire purchase type of model where you buy something, but you can send it back at the end of its life. You're sent a new one and then you send it back and then you're sent a new one. And
yeah, so it's kind of like changing attitudes at every stage with both the customer and the consumer and the business. You're giving the customer what they want, but also you're just pushing things a little bit in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I think consumer behaviour is one of the key things.
So the key project that you're working on right now is the BFTT, the Business of Fashion, Textiles and Technology, which is a 5-year plan and funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And you're trying to give that research and development opportunity to small businesses so that they can make these sustainable choices and adjust their business models. Can you give me some examples of some of the companies that you're working with?
Yeah, we're leading a 5-year product by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And we have 6 universities, also the V&A Museum working with us, University of Arts London, Free University, UCL, University of Leeds, Queen Mary London, and also the University of Cambridge. The programme works with, we have a cohort of about 20 companies. I think a couple of examples of ones that we're working with is a company called Segura. They're an online platform that provides information for the supply chain and for the sector. What's that supply chain and what are their credentials going through the supply chain? It looks at the certification, the green credentials, the sustainability credentials, and the ethical credentials of companies globally within the supply chain at different points. That they've just finished working with us and they've produced this map, and their product is being built right now.
That sounds amazing. And actually, it's something that I'd quite like to access as a consumer, to check the supply chain involved in the things that I buy. Did it come from a sustainable source? Were the workers treated fairly? How was it shipped? I mean, that would be wonderful.
I've probably not done them a great deal of justice there because their product, it's a 12-month research project to really dig deep into what the needs of the supply chain are. Each point in the supply chain, what information is needed by the company that is procuring from company A that is then procuring from company B, and so it goes on.
So that's a fantastic service that you're offering to these companies who probably couldn't afford to do that kind of research and development if they were doing it on their own.
Absolutely, and I think one of the real strengths of this model that we've got is that it does provide funding. So there is kind of funding that the companies can access. Some of the feedback we've had is that the real key is that link with the university, the support that comes from the university, kind of the leading edge knowledge of what is being transferred. So it's knowledge transfer into the company, but also the knowledge that's coming back into the university from the company of, real life example of research in action. And then this propels the company forward in terms of their ability to get that product to market. And in this case of Segura's, the product is a platform. In other cases, other projects we've got the products might be, more material.
Quite literally, if you're working in fashion.
So, one of the other companies we're working with, Black Horse Lane Telliers, for example, have just onshoring the first UK sustainable denim washing. The way that denim is finished. If you think of the old Levi's ads, and you think of the stone wash, or of course the last thing we want at the moment is green wash.
No.
So one of the things that they're doing is onshoring the new processes that enable far more sustainable, because denim washing is incredibly resource intensive. It's not up there with the most sustainable ways of producing clothing, but this is one of the things that they are really looking into.
This sounds like a wonderful project that's really making a difference to these small businesses in the fashion and textile world who are benefiting from that access to university expertise and help to adjust their supply chains. And one of the companies that I know you're working with, who I actually went to speak to for this podcast, is Elvis and Kresse. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that one?
Absolutely, yes. So Kresse is the co-founder of Elvis and Kresse, and she has set up with the support of BFTT a sustainable solar-powered forge which recycles aluminium cans and other kinds of waste products back into things that you will recognise from everyday life, like belt buckles and little D-rings on bags.
Nikki will be back later in the episode to give us some top tips on how to make more sustainable fashion choices. But first, let's hear from Kresse.
This project is just a dream come true. So we have always wanted to make our own hardware, our buckles and things like that. But we wanted to do it in an Elvis and Kresse way. And then because I'm on the board of Keep Britain Tidy, which is this amazing charity that has worked on litter and waste and place for decades, I became aware of this research that looked into how many drinks containers were littering every year in the UK. 32 million a year. Half of those are aluminium cans. The littering of these objects results in the death of 3 to 4 million small mammals because they're getting hit by cars crossing the road. They're getting stuck in these cans. So it's not just a litter issue. It's an issue for biodiversity loss. So we thought, why don't we make our hardware from aluminium cans? And I initially thought, of course, technology will save us. I'll be able to find a 3D metal printer, chuck in a can, get a buckle out the other end. And I did loads of research looking into whether or not that was possible. And despite what you see on the internet, all the experts that I found from across many UK universities told me that kind of technology is at least a decade away and it will cost a fortune. So what do we do about the problem right now? And that was when I met with the BFTT program. And I said, look, we need a small scale solar forge that can be duplicated across the world, that everyone can use, not just us. And this kind of forge doesn't exist. A safe, cheap, renewably powered forge doesn't exist. And they partnered us with Queen Mary University, and we got this incredible team together who have, over the course of the pandemic, been beavering away and have developed a solar-powered microforge that costs very little to build. And we're about to relocate that forge to the farm. It works. We can cast buckles. We can make hardware. And I think more importantly, and this goes back to the ethics behind Elvis and Kresse, BFTT is public funds. We got a grant for this. And I think it would be wildly inappropriate to privately benefit from public funds. So this has always been a open source concept. The forge doesn't belong to us. The forge belongs to everyone. The designs will be shared. Anyone in the world can copy it, can iterate on it, and can take it to new levels, can make it for less, can make it, adapt it for rescuing plastic waste, can adapt it for any manufacturing process that requires heat. And it's a technology that can be built locally and on small budgets and can help communities all over the world engage with recycling. Because right now we've got in the UK, I would say, huge, big, vastly efficient recycling facilities. But people don't have intimate access to them. So they don't get to love recycling. They don't get to feel a part of recycling. And we need to make recycling culturally outstanding. We need people to get as excited about recycling as they do about, I don't know, the next series of Line of Duty, right? We need people to be like, oh my God, I can't wait to go and see that recycling machine. And that's only going to be possible if these machines are in the community and operated by communities. And I can't wait till ours is up and running on the farm and people from all over the world can come and see it work.
So, Kresse, you're really challenging our concept of what waste and rubbish is when it comes to fashion, aren't you?
Yes, I think we're challenging just the very notion of waste altogether.
And tell me the story of how you came up with your company.
I moved to the UK in 2004, and it was a unique time in life where I thought, you know, I've got an opportunity to really explore what I might want to do. So what am I interested in? And actually I'm interested in waste. So the first place I went to see in the UK was the sewer. Then I went to see some landfill sites, some waste transfer stations, some recycling facilities. When I first saw a fire hose and thought, wow, what a beautiful piece of lovely wonderfulness this is, I knew it would be my job to make sure it had a second life. And it didn't end up just dying in landfill because it's just too beautiful to destroy.
I love that the American comes to the UK and visits the sewer and the landfill. I mean, that's not normally what happens. Did you also see the castles and the whiskey distilleries and Buckingham Palace and all those kind of things too?
Actually, eventually I did. And I have to say that probably my favorite visit of all of those three things would be a whiskey distillery. But I certainly have a lot of love for the UK. You know, it's not just that my only appreciation of British culture is the waste, but I think that it's everyone's obligation to make the world better. For me, it was waste. And I knew then, way back in 2005, that I could make a tangible difference from day one. And I suppose that was the attraction for me, is that waste is quantifiable. And even when we were only rescuing one fire hose, I knew that I was keeping 18 kilos of fire hose out of the ground.
That's a great way to look at it. And as you've grown, obviously you've kept a lot more than that out of the ground. And have you diversified? Is it just fire hoses that you use, or do you use other products?
No, we now rescue about 10 different materials on a regular basis. We are completely obsessed, as you can imagine, because I don't see the point in coming up with this great green product and then packaging it in a virgin material. So we make all of our own packaging from another waste, which is a tea sack. For us, every single time we think of another function that the business must do, we then think of a waste stream that can help us to achieve it. We go out in search of another material. And sometimes the materials find us. So another material we rescue is leather waste, and that's definitely a material that found us. We had an amazing saddle maker who approached us in probably 2010, and he had a bag of leather waste and needed it to become something else. And we thought, if this one small scale saddle maker is producing this, what's the industry like? And after some research, we discovered a UN report that said there was about 800,000 tons a year. After making a few phone calls, I knew the problem was way worse than that, because there's a lot of companies that simply don't report the waste that they produce. And that's why we developed a leather system that helps you turn scraps, tiny little bits of seemingly useless offcut, into high value material that can be used again and again and again. So it's a classic example, or maybe one of the first examples in luxury of circular design. Why should you go for new if there's something that exists already?
What do you reckon, Mark? Would you buy a bag made out of old fire hoses?
I've always wanted to buy a bag. Well, actually, not a bag. I've always wanted to buy one of the wallets. And part of the reason I wanted to buy it is because it's got a real certain odour about them. And I don't know what it is about this sort of burnt rubber that I like. And I think this is maybe too much detail.
She's amazing. What a fantastic story. And don't you love stories like that, where she's made sustainable choices, but also she's created something that people want to buy because it's fashionable?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, really important about those type of products is it's not the sustainability that I think is selling it for a lot of people. What you've got there is a product that inherently is a fashionable product, that it does all the things that we expect a fashionable product to do, whether it's a wallet or whether it's a bag or even clothing. It allows people to express something about their character. So that's the role that fashion does. It's that communication thing. The focus has been, let's make it as sustainable as possible. And I have to confess, I did this myself some years ago when I was working in the industry. Developed some yoga clothing.
Ooh, yoga. Tell me more. I love yoga.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't have liked these products. This was developed back in, I think it was 2001, 2002, very early in the days of organic production, and the product was awful.
Oh no, was it really?
It was so stiff, it could stand up by itself. So these trousers, these yoga pants could stand up by themselves. It was like having sandpaper against the skin.
Oh no, that sounds awful.
It was a terrible product. Our focus was sustainability, and we just went, sustainability really important. And then, of course, we suddenly realised, it doesn't work like that. So that's the real challenge. And this is where, people like Kresse have done a fantastic job. They've done an enormous amount of work to be able to work out what's sustainable, but haven't forgotten that there's a customer at the end of the line who may or may not be interested in sustainability.
Well, this is what Kresse was saying. She has these three groups of consumers. She has the firefighters in their community who are so supportive of what she's doing with cast-off fire hoses. Then she has the second group who are kind of conscious consumers who love the story behind the brand. And then the third group who just find her products really fashionable and want to buy them because they love them. And they're almost unaware that they're making a sustainable or environmental choice, and arguably they're the most important group because they're the ones that are then introduced to this world of better choices, more sustainable fashion, who can then go on to continue to make these choices.
I would definitely agree with that. So the market research tells us, for example, 95% are really interested in being eco-friendly. 87.5% of people want to buy and will be willing to spend more on a t-shirt that is organic, for example.
Yeah, in this hypothetical world created by market researchers where we would all love to think that we were ecologically conscious shoppers who would always make the right choice.
Absolutely, and this is what we see. Your behaviour is driven partly by intention, but what it's also driven by is a number of other things, but importantly things like context. Yes, I have an intention to be green and to be eco-friendly, but by the time you get to that point where I'm taking my purse or my wallet out of my back pocket and I'm about to hand over the cash or pay with my credit card, what I'm thinking about is, how am I going to use that garment? How is that garment going to make me look attractive? And this might be, look sexually attractive. Mm-hmm. It might be, how's this garment going to make me look attractive to a potential employer in the job interview scenario?
Yeah.
How is this garment going to make me look like I fit in with my friends?
Yeah. So we've discussed all sorts of ways that the fashion industry is adapting to make sure it's more sustainable. So from a consumer point of view, for an individual listening to this podcast, Mark, what are the things that we can do?
So the first thing is to say, right, what is it I need to buy? Why do I need to buy it? And where am I going to buy it from? Who are the brands that I normally engage in? And if you go onto their website, and if you look at their reports and look at, the information that they're providing around their sustainability, if that brand that you're buying from is saying nothing about sustainability, make the assumption that they are doing nothing. Write to the chair or the chief executive's office directly. Don't go through customer services. Go to the top. The other thing you can do, and probably more constructive, is go and find a brand where actually they are talking about what they're doing, which initiatives they're part of. Are they part of the Sustainable Clothing Action Plan 2020? Are they part of the new UK initiative, which is Textiles 2030? Have they signed up to the ETI base code? Have they signed up to ZDHC, which is the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals? Have they signed up to Sustainable Apparel Coalition? There's something like £40 billion worth of garments sitting in a wardrobe in the UK. I think the wardrobe's just outside Barnsley.
It's a gold mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're making that decision about buying clothing, it's about saying, how can I actually buy this product and make sure that I use it as much as I can? Does it actually need to be washed? Washing is all about removing stains and maybe giving it a better smell. Now, you can actually air something, stick it out in the sun, and with washing, what you're doing there, you are not only using water, not only using energy to heat up that water, not only using washing powders and chemicals that go down the drain eventually. And by the way, going down the drain as well, we'll find there'll be some microfibers going down the drain as well. But what you're also doing when you're washing that garment is every time you're washing it, you're reducing the lifespan of that garment. This constant abrasion in that washing machine and tumbling over and over again sort of fades it. It can cause shrinkage. It leads to pilling, all sorts of issues.
I love this. You realise you've just given me an out. I don't need to do quite so much laundry. As the mother of 2 small children and a very tall husband, I feel like all I do is wash. So good. I like this advice.
Although, Kim, you do have to remember to be a member of society, you will have to do some washing at some point.
Okay, fair point. I'll try to not send them to school covered in toothpaste marks and stains. Great tips there. Thank you, Mark. And I know that we've got Kresse and Nikki here to tell us more fashion tips that we can all implement ourselves too.
The first choice that you have to make is to learn to love what you already have. The most ecological item that you possibly own is what you already own. So you have to cherish all of those items and make sure you keep them around for a long time. The second thing that you can do is actually buy secondhand. And although there's a proliferation of fashion-specific secondhand sites, I don't really see the need for most of them because we've had eBay for a long time and it works beautifully and wonderfully. The other thing that you can do is a lot of research into the kind of brand that you want to support. And for me, that means calling them up, asking a few questions. And if you can't get the answers to some very serious questions within 2 phone calls, then I don't think you should support a company like that.
Use your social media playtime wisely. Do some research into brands, do some research into their credentials, but also seek out sustainable brands. Does it have to be a purchase? Could it be a different kind of model? Could it be renting, for example? If you're buying something for a one-off, what's going to happen to it afterwards? Does it end up at the back of your wardrobe and never get seen again? If you do buy, then it could be something that you then resell. And then I think finally, always donate or recycle anything you don't want anymore. Never throw anything in the bin, never put anything to landfill.
Great tips from Nikki there. Do you want to know a funny story? When we were moving house, I gave my husband a bag of clothes to take to a charity shop, and he went in. I was waiting in the car. He came back out and said, no, she's not accepting this bag of clothes. She thinks we're in the middle of a divorce and she wants you to come in and prove that I'm allowed to donate these clothes.
I don't know much about your relationship, but I don't want to comment on that. I think one of the challenges that the fashion industry has when we're talking about sustainability is actually conveying to people fashion, the role of fashion is intrinsic in who we are. If we say you have to stop buying stuff, you have to stop buying all of these things, it's not good for the planet. What we're saying to individuals is we don't value this idea that you have self-identity. We don't think it's important for you to have self-esteem. It's a really challenging area that we can deliver the self-esteem, the self-identity, the well-being that's associated with fashion, but decoupling that from this idea of environmental impacts and exploitation of workers in the supply chain. It's the challenge we have now. Consumers should be challenging industry about what they're doing. They should also be getting in contact with their politicians and saying, in my local area, there's no way to recycle textile clothing and clothing. We have to empower ourselves to have those conversations. But if we all do it, then we start to see some change happen.
Yep, and if we all do it, then we're one step closer to making emissions impossible. Emissions Impossible is a Connect production for UK Research and Innovation. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe.